Hello, welcome everyone for this paper session. We have 3 exciting presentations with authors and their papers. The role of meaning in coping with the pandemic, very timely. The 3 groups of presenters, we will start with Bernadette Sanders. She is from Buckingham New University. We have Anastasia and her colleagues from HSC University and Moscow City University. The 3rd presenter is Leah Jasmine, and she will introduce herself when her time comes. So each speaker will take about 10 minutes for their main presentation. We have 5 minutes for discussions, and then we'll go on to the second speaker. So each session, each paper will have about 15 minutes. And we can start with Bernadette.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to share my screen. So yes, thank you, Joyce. And my name is Bernadette Saunders, and I'm with Buckinghamshire New University in the UK. And I'm a second-year student doing the Masters in Applied Positive Psychology. And I'm absolutely delighted to be invited to share a case study that I did on finding meaning beyond COVID-19. And I would like to just draw your attention to the quote from Martin Luther King, which is, "Only in the darkness can you see the stars." And really, I feel it resonates very much with this title. So known as COVID-19, the coronavirus was declared a pandemic last March by the World Health Organization. And as we know, it's caused major suffering and disruption around the world. And many people have lost jobs and have experienced negative financial, social and emotional consequences from the imposed isolation and the economic downturn effect. Fear has been widespread, which has also had an impact on increased mental health conditions such as substance misuse and depression and anxiety, which has been seen by Liu et al. Last year in some of their research. And many people have experienced an increase in existential anxiety, as highlighted by Yolam, and the realities of having to confront with issues of death, isolation, and a meaningless life. So as positive psychology continues to evolve and develop, one of the growing areas of research, which is a strong predictor of well-being, is having a sense of meaning in life. And Steger really highlights the overwhelming conclusion that meaning is closely tied into a vast array of well-being indicators. Frankl's classic, his book on Man's Search for Meaning, was really very instrumental in highlighting the importance of meaning in life. And he suggested that we all have a purpose in life, which if we can follow will lead to more fulfillment and satisfaction. And his famous quote highlighted here in red is that everything can be taken from a man, but one of the last freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances and to choose one's own way, which I feel is really quite inspiring and aspirational. And so really thinking about meaning, there is always a little bit of debate when you consider the psychological study of meaning, because it taps into the philosophical or theological viewpoints, which slightly take meaning out of the modern science realm. However, the whole debate is significant when it's related to one's subjective experience of the psychological and existential impact on meaning in one's own life. And when this is the case, meaning can be measured, compared, and hypothesized within the psychological context. So there are many different theories which aim to distinguish meaning and the role it has in our lives, which really differentiates between purpose in life compared to meaning in life. And it's these differences that can incorporate the different reflections of our own experience and understanding of meaning. Steger refers to meaning as understanding-based cognitive experience, where we can try and make sense of our life and our roles in it. And this really links to our self-concept, which allows us to understand the self and the world and our role in the world. So the overview of my presentation is that it highlights the self-reflective findings through autoethnography as demonstrated from Chang, And it aims to explore the link between the dark side of suffering linked to COVID-19 and existential positive psychology, which overlaps with second wave positive psychology as demonstrated by Vitson et al. And really looking at meaning, growth, healing, insight and transformation on the back of engaging in challenging experiences and emotions which may lead to distress. So looking at fear, really, during the last year and a half living with COVID-19, death has, become a reality for many, and really the fear of death has been reinforced by the media and government campaigns, initially really to try and encourage people to stay in and to adhere to the lockdown rules. However, this fear unfortunately kind of increased a further sense of meaninglessness plus emotional consequences from the imposed isolation as seen by Liu et al. And during this time, I personally lost both my mother and sister-in-law. And although they didn't die with COVID-19, I became very aware really of death and I guess just aware of how mainstream media were really using, trying to escalate fear with their constant messages of how many people were dying. Cherry highlights that the media can fuel fear with a sense of dependence and hopelessness, which resonates with learned helplessness. And I reflected on how these messages were fueling people's natural fear of catching COVID or becoming very ill or dying, instead of empowering people to be well from this really quite powerful medium. So looking at the findings of my case study, Exploring Death, when we think of death, we may refer to it as a taboo subject, and yet Kubler-Ross reflects that it's the one sure thing we know we'll experience in our lifetime. And although my personal losses were very difficult, I felt such gratitude that I was able to get over to Ireland, especially during lockdown, to be able to attend the family wakes and funerals. So I grew up in Ireland and I live in the UK. And, I actually feel quite blessed really that I was able to have a culture, grow up in a culture that really from an early age, I had an acknowledgement of death, acceptance. And we know the power of gratitude, Dr. Robert Emmons' work over the years, really showing how healing gratitude can be. And for me, being able to be there with family and immerse myself in the situation, I could really resonate with the research from WISP that really opening oneself up to pain without avoiding it or disconnecting it can really facilitate healing because it allows you to be more authentic. And Harter highlights that authenticity is regarded as a key human feature of existential philosophy and refers to it as being true to oneself. And being more authentic, as reflected in my findings, increased my own self-awareness, which encouraged a more self-actualized existence, which is also demonstrated by Dr. Wong in his research in 2010. I resonated with the quote from Kubler-Ross on, "We can only truly live and enjoy and appreciate life if we realize at all times that we are finite." And I find myself having a heightened existential awareness and being able to appreciate life and, being able to appreciate the good life as seen by Wong in 2013. And this really linked into my own strength in the via of spirituality about having a higher purpose and meaning in life from the research from Peterson and Seligman with the via. At the time I started mindful meditation, really when I started doing the masters, with the aim of being more present. But I was very aware that during that time it really helped me to create a sense of space and peace. And I had reflected as well that especially during the first lockdown, there was a real sense of connectedness. And for many that has continued where people have just, life has slowed down a wee bit and almost a sense of that mindfulness that people have been able to incorporate. But Sedlimer and et al. In 2012 highlighted that mindfulness-based practices have a huge effect, positive effect on well-being. And these findings have been replicated many times by fellow researchers. So in conclusion, really one of the things that I feel is that the whole experience of COVID-19 may actually pose a challenge to first wave positive psychology, as many people are still struggling with grief and fear. Frankl states that human beings are suffering beings and highlighted tragic optimism, where he referred to it as an optimism in the face of tragedy. And this really reinforced what Frankl calls, the power of hope in meaning and the value of life. So meaning as an area of contemporary research has largely been neglected over the years. However, the recent COVID-19 pandemic has really sparked a renewed interest in this area of meaning and purpose in life, especially with regards to increasing well-being and transcending suffering. So in conclusion and potential maybe future research opportunities, the Van Tungerens in their book last year suggested that having an existential positive psychology approach to suffering may actually help promote the core issues underlying each person's experience of suffering and highlight the importance of building strong relationships, values, and virtues which promote flourishing. And this approach blends existential perspectives and positive psychology, which really aims to help people create meaning through dark times in their life, which is demonstrated as well by Ivica et al. And it's these questions, such as the meaning of life within philosophy, religion, and psychology, that have been evoked by COVID-19 that potentially could be a catalyst for positive change in the future and potential research opportunities. So I will end on my references and also the quote, which I love, from Nietzsche on "What does not kill me makes me stronger." And we'll welcome any questions that you have, if we have time.
Sure, we have about 3 minutes for questions, and you can type in the chat if participants, guests, want to ask questions. Thank you, Bernadette, for sharing your
Thank you, Joyce. Do you want me to stop sharing? Shall I just stop sharing my screen?
You can stay here. You can stay on whichever screen you prefer, or you can, if you stop sharing, we can see your face.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry for your loss. So I start with the first question.
Thank you.
For what you have experienced in the past few months, does it change the way that you're approaching your future research field?
Definitely, I feel that with my dissertation that I will focus on looking at how fear has been used and looking at meaning beyond COVID, and really being able to tap into the power of visualization, the power of, because one of the things that really hasn't been highlighted is how fear dampens the immune system and actually can make people feel more ill, and how the media has a real wonderful opportunity to be able to empower people, around that. So, yeah.
It's interesting. So the tragic experience can serve as a gift to you.
And like I said earlier, I do feel that growing up in an Irish Catholic community, I am blessed really, because I do think that, many people can't really get their heads around that you might go to a wake where you have, the coffin in the same room, but it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to say goodbye, to be able to connect and celebrate life as well, which is so lovely.
Thank you. How many more months are you in your study?
So a lot of my colleagues have actually done their dissertation this summer, but I put mine off to from September onwards. So yes.
Very good.
Doing it in the next cycle. So thank you.
Thank you for your contribution. We wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And continue. We can network from this point on.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Then let me invite the next paper session speaker, Antonia and her colleagues from the HSC University. Yeah.
Anastasia.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm really represent a group of authors from Moscow right now, and we are working on the field of existential psychology. our work addresses mostly the issue of well-being in a context of urban environment. But I will present a small piece of our recent research. Let me demonstrate it. One moment. Can you see?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Here is okay, I think. So yes, as I said, this is just a small piece of our recent research regarding psychological consequences of the pandemic. This is more empirical work with no such, deepened experience as I forgot the name. Bernadette said. But I hope you'll find it interesting as well. These psychological consequences of the pandemic, it becomes a central theme in psychology over the last year. But for now, there is no clear question how severe these consequences is, or how universal these consequences is. In here, I show just a few examples of different studies and their contradictory, conclusions. So, and we know in an existential psychology, we know that personal well-being can be resilient to stressors depending on the way the person is settled in his life, in their life. So we were curious to know what dynamics we will see if we take an existential approach to well-being, and also what is the relationship between the existential fulfillment, well-being, and the mental health. Here you can see the research questions we have posed for ourselves. I will return to these questions in the result section of my speech. So we will see it. We used the combined methodology. In here, you can see more traditional instruments for measuring well-being. Here, first three. And this is relatively new approach for measuring well-being. This is well-being as an existential fulfillment. And this study, we decided to use the model of existential fulfillment proposed by Alfred Langley. It seems to us to be complete and consistent, and it fits well to the more traditional models of measuring well-being. So, a couple of words about this Alfred model. Fulfilled life is life with the inner consent that can be found through the dialogical relationship with the world and with the self. Alfred developed a structural model in which he described 4 themes of such dialogue. You can see these topics on the side. They have a hierarchical structure, the main 4 components, and the 3 prerequisites for each one. So, in other words, existence can be seen as continuous dialogue with these themes, which is fundamental trust, value of life, authenticity, and meaning is meaning of life. And these foundations of a fulfilled life people are always motivated to gain, improve, or protect these fulfilling elements, and therefore they are called the fundamental existential motivations. I will say FM. In here you can see this just to short it. And what about the empirical research? The research, it consists of 2 stages. The first stage from April to May 2020, it was the peak of the outbreak in Moscow that time. During this first period in here, here is just the statistics for Moscow about the pandemic, you see. And this is in this first period, citizens were required to use electronic passes, avoid public places, maintain self-isolation. Schools, universities, all of it been closed, was closed. And in here, in the second stage of data collection, it was a half a year later, from November to December 2020. During the second wave. So the design. We have a large sample of respondents, and then a half a year later, respondents from the first sample were asked to re-participate. And after cleaning the data, I have 103 unique units remained in here. You can see the description of the sample. So I will say only about this small piece of this pie. Some more description of a sample. It is interesting in here to know that already in the frequency level, in level of frequencies, we saw a slight decrease in health, in mental health. The number of respondents with mental disorders increased from 5 to 18% within this connected sample. We used several questionnaires, more than I present in here, but important that we will take a mental health continuum short form of it. This a unique questionnaire because it's given opportunity to assess not only well-being but also diagnose the mental health state. So it has 3 subscales of well-being, and also respondents can be diagnosed with flourishing mental health, languishing, and with the moderate mental health if neither. And the existential well-being measured using the test of existential motivations. It is questionnaires that were created in our university. It based on Langley's 4 fundamental motivation model and reproduces the structure I mentioned above in here. This structure of 4 components. Some results, just some of them. So with the first question, what are these dynamics of existential fulfillment? And we can say that there is a dynamics and it's negative. The average values of all indicators decreased, but only in this 3rd and 4th motivations, it decreased significantly. According to students' tests. For the second question in here, are the dynamics of existential fulfillment related to mental health? We can also say yes. We see that among the respondents who belong to flourishing category, There is no change, no decrease in FM levels. At the same time, moderately healthy individuals have a decrease only in a third and a fourth FM. This is authenticity, and this is a meaning. And the languishing, did I say it right? No? Has an total decrease in all four subscales. It is important to know that the mental health continuum, this mental health state, and these three groups, were measured only one time at the fall, in fall. But the significance of existential variables is confirmed. Those who have relatively low FM scores in spring have they have a largest decline in mental health in fall. So this is the most vulnerable category. Some more questions. We checked the relation between the existential indicators and the emotional, psychological, and social well-being. And we can see these two parts. The first is just FM levels measured during the second wave. And the second part in here is the difference between the fall and spring. So if the difference are negative, then the respondents' well-being declined in half a year. And if it's positive, then the respondent's condition improved. In this first part, we see that all aspects of fulfillment are significantly related to all aspects of well-being. But in the second part, we can see that it is a decrease of sense of meaning that is significantly correlates with all components of well-being. The more the more experience of meaning decreased, the lower respondents' well-being. With other existential themes, which are also important, there's no such connection. We're also interested. There's also interesting that the decrease in the sense of support in here, the first FM, is significantly correlated with the emotional well-being. So the greater the decrease in the sense of support, the less person experience a positive emotion. This is the regression analysis that confirms these results, that the experience of having meaning in life seems to be a leading predictor of mental health. The fundamental trust also related to the trust in specific public institutions. We measured it like direct questions. Do you can rely on the government decision? Do you can rely on medical system? And there is a positive connection. I think my time is off, right? So just saying yes, and I am finishing. The last thing I'm going to say that all of these tendencies are not universal. Everything can be, changed by the way the person is settled in his life. And here is the last slide. Here is just the question, an existential question that can help us to understand what is the fundamental trust and what is the meaning. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia, for sharing with us what is happening in Moscow. We wish you all the best in your future research endeavors. Okay, last but not least, we have our third paper presenter from Germany, correct? Lee Jasmine Siedel.
Thank you very much. Let me just pull up my presentation. Can you see the PowerPoint slides now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much for this opportunity to present the work that I've been recently doing together with my supervisors, Judith Daniels and Brian Ostafin. I'm Leah Yasmin Seidel, and today I would like to present to you what we found out about the role of meaning in life and mental health during the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition to being a virus pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic has been termed a mental health crisis, or even a mental health pandemic. And that is because the pandemic entails many potentially traumatic stressors, and hence one might expect a surge in stressor-reactive mental health issues. In fact, a meta-analysis of international studies published until May of 2020 showed point prevalences of stressor-reactive mental health conditions such as depression and anxiety, which were significantly higher than what is usually observed. Another mental health condition oftentimes studied in the aftermath of traumatic experiences, as well as during the pandemic, is post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as adjustment disorders. And also for this condition, very high rates have been reported. This crisis, however, affords us the opportunity to study protective factors. And the aim of our study was to investigate if experiencing meaning in life might function as such a protective factor. Just a super quick recap, and this might be known to most of you. Let me start with some working definitions. So meaning in life is oftentimes defined as an overall sense that one's life is meaningful, that there is some meaning in one's existence. And according to tripartite model, the first one, comprehension, refers to one's experiences. Which is finding one's life important, significant, and worth living. There's quite a wealth of evidence showing an inverse association between meaning and mental health problems. For this kind of research, particularly stemming from stressor-exposed populations. Apart from very few exceptions, the research that has been executed to date is cross-sectional. In such cross-sectional research, cancer patients and trauma-exposed elderly, for anxiety in cancer patients and smoking cessation program participants, and for PTSD in earthquake survivors, trauma-exposed students, and veterans. And the next question is why, right? Why may meaning function as a protective factor? And of course, there is a lot of potential reasons for this inverse association. And I would like to talk about two of those reasons. The first one being the argument of transcendence. That is, when committing to and focusing on personally relevant sources of meaning. And this can be very different things for different people, right? It can be things such as raising children or work, one's career, religion, spirituality, all kinds of things. But when doing so, this might help transcending the self and the momentary suffering of the self. And together with the motivational force, purpose, this might counteract maladaptive behaviors such as rumination and behavioral disengagement. A second potential reason is a reduction of aversive uncertainty. As noted by many, the pandemic life has been marked by great uncertainty. And uncertainty, especially when associated to threat, can induce great anxiety and distress. The argument then continues that people experiencing having clear goals and clear values can reduce their behavioral. So what shall I do? How do I best act in this moment? As well as perceptual. So the kind of what's happening around me, kinds of uncertainty. And by reducing uncertainty, meaning can therefore potentially reduce the stress. The hypotheses we aimed to investigate were first, that higher pre-pandemic meaning is associated with less symptoms of depression, anxiety, and COVID-related PTSD during the first wave of COVID in Europe. The second hypothesis was that higher peri-pandemic meaning is again associated with less symptoms. Moreover, we wanted to exploratorily compare the meaning components and their associations with mental health. Let's come to the methods section. So our participants were first-year psychology students. Between October 2019 and March 2020, our students filled out a short screening questionnaire. 347 participants took part in this. Once COVID broke out, we implemented the second assessment and re-invited participants. Between April and June of 2020, 109 of those participants took part again. Our participants were on average 20 years of age, the majority of them were female, and most of them were either Dutch or German. Important probably for you to know is that study continuation was independent of age, gender, and baseline meaning. Our online questionnaire assessments included, for example, before the pandemic, an assessment of meaning with the meaningfulness subscale of the sources of meaning questionnaire, and an assessment of anxiety. During the pandemic, we again assessed meaning with the sources of meaning questionnaire, but now also with a multidimensional existential meaning scale. Moreover, we assessed anxiety, depression, and COVID-related PTSD. And this is what we found. Let's first have a look at descriptives, where yellow highlighted parts refer to assessments before the pandemic, and blue highlighted parts to the assessment during the pandemic. Interestingly, before the pandemic, our students reported relatively high levels of meaning, but already moderately high levels of anxiety as well. If we then compared those values to what they reported during the pandemic, they reported significantly lower levels of meaning and, strangely, no significantly different levels of anxiety. Moreover, we applied thresholds or cutoffs to establish percentages of our participants who might experience clinically relevant levels of distress. And as you can see, particularly in the low right part, this was quite a remarkable portion of our participants, particularly for depression. Regarding our hypotheses, this being the first one regarding the prospective associations with meaning, we took two analytical steps. We first looked at Pearson correlations and applied a Bonferroni-Halm correction to reduce the family-wise type 1 error rate. And here in the left red box, you can see that both depression and anxiety levels during the pandemic were significantly associated with meaning before the pandemic. In a second step, we controlled for baseline levels of anxiety. And that is because pre-incident mental issues may predispose for stress-reactive mental health problems. And as mentioned before, mental issues commonly coincide with low meaning. In doing so, only the prospective association between meaning and depression remains significant. Regarding the second hypothesis with the concurrent associations with meaning, we followed the same analytical steps. So first looking at Pearson correlations with the Bonferroni-Halm correction, and then secondly, looking at semi-partial correlations when controlling for baseline anxiety. As you can see here, both assessments of meaning, both measures, so the source of meaning questionnaire, as well as the MEMS, were significantly associated with all mental health outcomes. Next, we looked at the concurrent associations with the meaning in life subcomponents. And here you can see that all subcomponents of meaning were significantly inversely related to all mental health outcomes. However, when modeled together, this picture changed a bit. So stick with me and first look at step 1, please. So here we modeled the 3 different components of meaning. And you can see that only comprehension emerged as consistent, significant predictor of all mental health outcomes. Purpose was a significant predictor of depression, but mattering did not significantly predict any of the outcomes. In a second analytical step, we included baseline anxiety as well as overall meaningfulness into the model. This did not significantly change the effects we had observed before, and overall meaningfulness did not significantly predict depression, anxiety, or PTSD. So what to make of this? So quick recap, our main finding regarding the first hypotheses, well, our first hypothesis was partly supported. There was a prospective effect for depression. And this could be because there is a depression-specific pathway underlying this. For example, it might be related to the purpose component of meaning. That is, an individual who experienced great purpose before the pandemic would be somebody who experienced goals, direction, motivation, and potentially rewarding experiences as well, which might then counteract depressive symptoms when exposed to the crisis. Secondly, anxiety became insignificant after statistically controlling for baseline anxiety, and PTSD was not significantly associated with baseline meaning to begin with. And this could be because potentially for these outcomes, meaning during or after such a crisis might be more important than the level of meaning experienced before a crisis. This can be accounted for from a meaning violations or shattered assumptions perspective. In such perspectives, aversive experiences understood that if they're severe enough, they can violate meaning frameworks, for example, by contradicting beliefs or obstructing goals, which would lower meaning and induce great distress. In such cases, so in individuals that did experience a COVID-related meaning violation, the extent of meaning they experienced during or after the pandemic might be more closely associated to their levels of mental distress, here particularly anxiety and PTSD, than the level experienced before. And the observation that in the current sample, meaning in life was on average lower during the crisis than it had been before it, indicates that this might have been the case in our sample. Regarding the second hypothesis, being the concurrent association with meaning, this was fully supported. But of course, we need to be careful and we can't draw causal inferences about this. And it's very well possible that the variables are associated in other ways. Interestingly, when entered simultaneously with comprehension and the other meaning components, overall meaningfulness became insignificant as a predictor, indicating that it could be that the associations we had observed between meaning and mental health might have largely been driven by the comprehension subcomponent of meaning. Now, why particularly meaning? It could be that, why particularly comprehension, excuse me. It could be that comprehension functions as a gauge of meaning, framework, violation, or the absence of such a violation. For example, an individual reporting low comprehension during the crisis might be a person who had experienced a great meaning violation versus a person who reports a high sense of comprehension might be a person who did not experience such a meaning violation to begin with or recovered from an initial meaning violation, of which comprehension would then potentially be a gauge, an indicator of the violation or absence of a violation. And that purpose was a significant predictor for depression aligns with the earlier presented reasoning. That purpose, goals, and motivation might counteract depressive symptoms. So a super quick conclusion. In our study, meaning was significantly associated with mental health. Moreover, out of the meaning components, comprehension was most closely related to mental health. Clearly, further research is warranted, especially of experimental and longitudinal nature, to establish the causality and robustness of our findings. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Leah, Jasmine, for your time. This is interesting. Can you remind me again about the comprehension component on the conceptual definition of comprehension?
Of course. Let me go back to the meaning. So comprehension in the tripartite models is usually defined as a sense that there's coherence and understanding about one's life, so that you understand your own existence, you understand your role, you understand the world around you, and experience a sense of coherence regarding your life.
That's great. Thank you for sharing your work in Germany, Leah, Jasmine. Welcome all the participants, and thank you. And in a few moments, we will have 2 keynotes lining up for you. Okay, we'll see you in the other sessions. Thank you all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you too.
I think that's all.
Are we done?
I think, yeah.
I think we're
What
done.
happened?
With I hope that the translation
Anastasia, you did really well. Yes, absolutely. I always think how hard it must be when you're trying to say it in another language.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
I really enjoyed your talks, both of you.
It was excellent, really good. Both yours and Leah, really, really good.
Thank you.
come on, there's midnight in here. What do you want from me? It was the best I can do.
Oh, yes, no, it's been so lovely to meet both of you, and yes, we're over now. We're done.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Leah, thanks for the reports. It's very, very interesting. And do you have references in the end?
Of course, yeah.
Can you share the PowerPoint presentation with me? Maybe in here in this chat.
Let me see. Is there such a thing as sharing a document?
Yeah.
I can share. Can I share a file?
Can you? Oh,
yes, in the chat.
In the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, you want just the references, not the entire presentation? Of course.
You can send the entire presentation. I will be just happy to see it once more.
Yeah, of course. Wait a sec. Let me just copy paste my references in for you guys. Looks probably pretty dull. That's the first half, and now there's more coming. I try to keep it really short.
Wow, how'd you do that so quick?
Just copy paste it from my screen. There you go. That's the other half.
Well done.
Sources of meaning and meaning in life questionnaire. This is a really interesting thing.
Yeah, check it out. Actually, I think because we only use the subscale that assesses overall meaningfulness, but it's a gigantic scale. It also assesses the sources of meaning. So things such as religiosity and family and social relations and all kinds of stuff. And I think it's a really cool questionnaire. I never managed to use it in its full length because like 120 items, you can't put that in a normal questionnaire.
Items.
Yeah, it's huge. It's really cool.
Yep.
You know, and I actually think that all 3 of our presentations really balanced, really kind of complemented each other with your research, you know, so thank you guys. It's been so lovely meeting you.
Right.
And yes, good luck.
Yeah, good luck to you too. And
thank you.
Would you guys be interested to share your presentations with me maybe?
Yeah, definitely. Yes,
Maybe
definitely.
we just can put it on this chat as well. No?
If you guys put your email addresses, then I can email them. Yeah.
Yes, emails.
So on the left-hand side of the feed loop, there is the networking function.
Yeah.
On the
Yes.
yeah, so you
Right,
can go
okay.
through there so that we can keep contact.
Cool.
From
That's
Okay.
brilliant. That's brilliant, Joyce. Yeah, thank you.
Very nice. Thank you. So I also typed my email into the chat box in case you
Oh,
wanted.
did you? Well done.
Me too.
Okay,
Right.
let me do mine. Hold on.
Okay,
Excellent.
cool.
That's
Lovely.
right.
I really enjoyed your presentations. And Joyce, thank you very much for moderating our session.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure, my privilege.
And
It was a very good experience. I should go to sleep.
yeah, me too. It's 12:30 for me. I'm exhausted.
Yes, that's
Big job well
you
done.
understand me.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Let's go to sleep. Thank you.
Right. Right. So enjoy the rest of the conference, everybody, and hope to keep in touch. I wrote down your email addresses and I'm going to send you my presentation.
Perfect. I'm just making a note here in case I lose the chat, but I hope we won't. Yes.
Yes, I hope
It'll
so.
be fun. Okay.
Our techie will
Okay.
end this whenever he comes on.
Right.
Okay, perfect.
Lovely. Take care, everybody.
Excellent. Yeah, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Deeper the valley, the higher the mountain. No distance is too far when you're holding on to hope. Sing me a sad song over and over. I'll be alright by and by. Let me be consumed in a love divine to find where the treasure lies. I want to hear that small voice whisper to my forgotten soul. They say it's never too late to start again. What breaks your heart